Imagine this. You're running the most powerful country on earth. Your military dominates. Your economy towers over everyone else. Your currency is everywhere. But there's a problem. You're running out of gold. And not just a little. Billions of dollars are flowing out of your country. Foreign governments are lining up, demanding their gold back. The system that made you powerful is quietly collapsing. Now, here's the real twist. Instead of fixing the problem directly, you change the rules of the entire global game. You make it so that every country on Earth, whether they like you or not, needs your currency just to survive. Not for trade, not for luxury, for oil, the most important resource on the planet. So here are the questions you should be asking. How did oil become tied to the US dollar? Why do countries still need dollars even if they hate the United States? And what happens if this system just breaks? Because trust me, this isn't just history. This is the invisible system shaping your world right now. Let's rewind. It's 1944. World War II is still raging, but the outcome is becoming clear. The United States is emerging as the dominant economic power. So global leaders gather and create a new financial system. Simple rule: currencies are tied to the US dollar, and the dollar is tied to gold at a fixed rate, $35 per ounce of gold. This is known as the Bretton Woods system. It works beautifully for a while. Europe rebuilds, Japan rises, global trade explodes, and the US becomes the center of it all. But there's a hidden flaw. The US starts printing more dollars than it has gold to back. Why? Vietnam War spending, massive domestic programs, global military presence. Now, here's the problem. Other countries notice, and they start doing something dangerous. They exchange their dollars for gold. Let's do the math. In 1958, the US had around $20 billion in gold reserves. By 1971, that dropped to about $10 billion. Meanwhile, foreign-held dollars, over $50 billion. See the issue? There's far more paper than gold. This system is mathematically doomed. And then comes the moment everything changes. But here's where it gets interesting.
It's August 15th, 1971. President Richard Nixon goes on national television, and with a single decision, he shocks the world. He ends the dollar's convertibility into gold. Just like that. No more gold backing, no more guarantees. The dollar becomes a piece of paper. Now think about what that means. Why would anyone trust it? Why would countries hold it? Why wouldn't the entire system collapse overnight? That was the fear. Because without gold, the dollar loses its anchor. But here's the twist. Instead of collapsing, the US finds a new anchor, and it's far more powerful than gold. We're just getting started. Fast forward to 1974. The US is facing a serious problem. Without gold backing, global demand for dollars should fall. So they need a new strategy. Enter Saudi Arabia. At the time, it's the largest oil exporter in the world. And oil? It's the bloodline of the global economy. Cars, factories, electricity, everything depends on it. So the US makes a deal, a quiet one, behind closed doors. Here's the agreement. Saudi Arabia will price its oil only in US dollars. In return, the US will provide military protection and support. Saudi Arabia will also invest its oil profits back into US assets. Now pause. Think about what just happened. If every country needs oil, and oil is only sold in dollars, then every country needs dollars. No choice. No alternative. This is the birth of the petrodollar system, and it spreads fast. Other OPEC countries follow. Oil becomes globally priced in dollars, and suddenly, demand for the dollar explodes. But the implications go much deeper.
Let's break this down simply. Imagine you're a country like Japan in the 1970s. You need oil, but you don't have dollars. So what do? You export goods to earn dollars, or you borrow dollars. Either way, you become dependent on the US financial system. Now, scale this globally. Every country holds dollar reserves, trades in dollars, borrows in dollars. The result? The US can print money and the world absorbs it. This is sometimes called an exorbitant privilege. Let's do the math again. The US runs persistent trade deficit, imports more than it exports, and pays with dollars it can create. Meanwhile, other countries send real goods and resources in exchange for paper currency. That's not just trade, that's power. This is where it gets crazy, so stay with me, because this system creates a feedback loop.
Step 1. The world buys oil in dollars. Step 2. Oil exporting countries accumulate massive dollar reserves. Step 3. Those countries invest those dollars back into the US. This is called petrodollar recycling. Where does the money go? US Treasury bonds, real estate, financial markets. Let's put numbers on it. By the 1980s, oil exporters were recycling hundreds of billions of dollars into US assets. That means the US gets cheap financing, interest rates stay low, the economy keeps growing. It's like a financial perpetual motion machine. But here's the hidden risk. What happens if countries stop recycling? What happens if they stop trusting the system? We'll get to that disaster later.
Now, here's where things take a darker turn. Because once you control the global currency, you don't just gain economic power, you gain political power. The US can impose sanctions, cut countries off from dollar systems, freeze assets, and it works. Because if you can't access dollars, you can't buy oil. You can't trade globally. You're economically isolated. Let's look at examples. Countries like Iran, Venezuela, Russia have all faced restrictions tied to dollar access. This turns the dollar into something more than money. It becomes a tool of influence. Some would say a weapon. But here's the problem. The more you use a weapon, the more others try to avoid it. And that leads to cracks in the system.
Now, before you think this system is unbreakable, let's talk about the challengers. Countries are starting to ask, why do we need the dollar? China, for example, the world's largest oil importer, massive economy, growing financial influence. It starts pushing for oil trades in its own currency. Russia begins accepting alternative currencies. Some countries explore gold-backed trade again. Even Saudi Arabia, the original pillar of the system, starts hinting at diversification. Quick pause. If you're realizing how fragile this system actually is, hit subscribe, because this story is far from over. Now, here's the key point. The petrodollar system survives on trust and habit, not law, not force alone. If enough countries shift away, the system weakens. But it doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes, slowly, quietly, until suddenly, it doesn't work anymore. But before that happens, there was a moment when everything nearly broke.
Let's go back to 1973. Before the petrodollar system fully stabilizes, the Middle East erupts in conflict. Oil producers respond with an embargo, and suddenly, oil prices skyrocket. Let's do the numbers. Oil jumps from about $3 per barrel to over $12. That's a 300% increase. Economies panic, inflation surges, recession hits. This is the first oil shock, and it exposes something critical. The world is completely dependent on oil, and now on the dollar. But here's the twist. Instead of weakening the dollar, it strengthens it. Why? Because higher oil prices mean more dollars flowing into oil exporters, more recycling into US markets. The system becomes even more entrenched. Who wins? The US, more demand for dollars. Oil exporters, massive profits. Who loses? Oil importing countries. Developing economies drowning in debt. By the 1980s, many developing nations face debt crises. Interest rates spike. Entire economies collapse. This isn't just economics. This is a global power shift, and the petrodollar system sits right at the center of it.
Now, before you sit back and think this is just history, look around. The same patterns are emerging. Countries are questioning the dollar. Trade agreements are happening in local currencies, alternative systems. Central banks are buying gold again. Digital currencies are entering the conversation. This is the canary in the coal mine. because the system doesn't fail dramatically. It fades slowly until one day confidence breaks. And remember, the dollar's power doesn't come from gold anymore. It comes from demand, artificial demand, created through oil. So ask yourself, what happens if oil is no longer the center of the global economy? Electric vehicles, renewables, energy independence. If oil loses dominance, what happens to the system built on top of it?
So what does this story actually teach you? First, power isn't just about resources. It's about control of systems. The US didn't just rely on gold. It replaced it with something more powerful, global dependence. Second, the hidden pattern most people miss. Every financial system looks stable until it isn't. Bretton Woods seemed permanent. It collapsed. The petrodollar seems dominant, but it's not immune. Third, and this matters to you personally, this system affects everything: inflation, interest rates, global stability. When the dollar moves, the world moves, including your country, including your life.
So here's the final question. If the dollar's dominance was built on oil, and the world is slowly moving beyond oil, what replaces it? A new currency? A digital system? Or something no one sees coming yet? Because history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, the rhyme's getting louder. Before we end, let me know in the comments, do you think the petrodollar system will survive the next 20 years? Or are we watching the beginning of the end? And if you want to understand what might replace it, you'll want to watch the next video, because that story is already unfolding.